A United States senator's daughter was dying, slowly, quietly, behind closed doors that the public was never allowed to see through. A rare autoimmune disorder was tearing her body apart from the inside, devouring her red blood cells faster than her bone marrow could replace them. Only one blood type in the world could keep her alive. AB negative. Less than 1% of the population carries it. And for 2 years, 24 months without a single missed appointment, one woman walked into the same hospital, rolled up her sleeve, gave her blood, and then walked back to her real job, scrubbing toilets and mopping floors 4 corridors down from the very child she was keeping alive. She had no idea whose body her blood was flowing into. She had no idea that the small girl whose name appeared on national news once a year, the senator's only daughter, the future of one of the most powerful political families in the country, was breathing because of her. And the senator, a woman who sat on the Senate Health Committee, a woman who had built her entire political career on the promise of fixing American health care, had no idea that the only thing keeping her daughter alive was a janitor she passed in the hallway and never once thought to look at. Then one rainy Thursday night, the senator found out. She found out everything. And the woman who had been saving her child for 2 long years was right there in front of her, on her hands and knees, scrubbing vomit off the linoleum outside a bathroom on the 3rd floor. What that senator did next would either restore a family or expose the ugly truth about how power treats the people who hold the world together with their bare hands. 2 years earlier, Imani Carter finished a 13-hour overnight shift at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C. Her back ached in places she didn't know could ache. Her hands were raw from industrial bleach, the kind of bleach that strips paint off walls and grease off ovens, and given enough time, the skin off your knuckles. Her uniform smelled like every fluid the human body can produce. Her shoes, the same pair she had owned for 2 years, had cracks running through both soles. When it rained, her socks got wet before she made it from her car to the staff entrance. It was 7 in the morning. She should have driven home, microwaved a bowl of rice and beans, and gone to sleep before her next shift started at 7 that evening. Instead, Imani turned right at the lobby, past the chapel, past the vending machines that never seemed to get refilled, down a narrow corridor most patients and visitors didn't know existed. She walked into the hospital blood bank. The technician behind the counter looked up and smiled. He knew her. Everyone in this small department knew her by now. Same woman, same day each month, same quiet routine. Imani sat down in the donation chair the way other people sit down in a barber's chair. Casual, familiar, like she was just here for a trim, like giving away a piece of herself was as ordinary as putting on her coat. The technician tied a rubber tourniquet around her upper arm and tapped twice for a vein. "You realize how rare you are, right?" he said, swabbing her skin with iodine. "AB negative. We get maybe 2 regular donors a year with your type in this whole region, 2, and one of them moved to Florida last spring." He shook his head. "You're basically a hospital miracle wearing scrubs." Imani watched the needles slide in. Watched her blood, dark and slow, climb the clear plastic tubing and spill into the collection bag. She didn't look away. She never did. The first time she had given blood when she was 15 years old, her grandmother had told her to look. Always look. Never be ashamed of what your body can do. "You ever wonder where it goes?" the technician asked. "Whose veins it ends up in, we can't tell you, of course. Federal anonymity rules. Even I don't know most of the time. Your blood gets typed, screened, cross-matched, and shipped wherever it's needed. Could be a soldier at Walter Reed. Could be a baby in the NICU upstairs. Could be a stranger you'll pass on the bus tomorrow and never recognize." Imani shook her head softly. "I don't need to know. My grandmother used to tell me blood doesn't ask for credentials before it saves a life. It just runs where it's needed." She said the words the way someone recites a prayer they have been saying since childhood, without performance, without pride, just truth. The technician finished the draw, sealed the bag, labeled it with a barcode that meant nothing to her, and slid it into the chilled cooler beside 3 other bags. Within 48 hours, the contents of that bag would be inside another human being. Anonymous, untraceable, invisible. One person gives, another person receives. Neither one ever learns the other exists. Imani pressed cotton against the inside of her elbow. She had done this 7 times before today at this hospital. 7 months of quiet, unremarked giving. No one back at the cleaning supply room knew. No one in her family knew except her grandmother. There was no money in it, no tax write-off, no public acknowledgement. The only payment was a juice box and a packet of cheese crackers, both of which she accepted because she had learned a long time ago to never refuse free food. She did not know whose veins her blood would flow through. She did not need to know. But if she had known, every single thing about the next 2 years of her life would have unfolded differently. Stay with me, because the child who is receiving Imani's blood right now is the daughter of someone whose face you have seen on cable news more times than you can count. Imani worked the overnight shift at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital, 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning, 5 nights a week, sometimes 6 when the rent was due and the math refused to add up. Her official title was Environmental Services Technician. In plain English, she was a janitor, the lowest rung on the hospital ladder. She earned $16.20 an hour, which sounded like more than the federal minimum wage until you tried to live on it in the most expensive city in America. After taxes, after health insurance, after the mandatory union dues, her take-home was roughly $2,200 a month. Her one-bedroom apartment in a building with broken elevators and broken radiators cost her $1,400 of that every single month before she bought a single can of beans. Her job was simple on paper: strip soiled linens, mop blood and bile and worse off the floors, restock the soap dispensers, empty the biohazard bins, sanitize the high-touch surfaces, wipe down the rails of cribs in the pediatric oncology wing. Clean the playroom toys with a solution so strong it dissolved the painted faces off the dolls within a month. An ease tech is the person who walks into the worst rooms in the building at the worst moments of strangers' lives and removes the evidence so that the next family who walks in does not have to see what happened to the family before. And they are invisible. Not poetically invisible. Literally invisible. Doctors stepped around Imani like she was a folded chair left in the hallway. Nurses gave her instructions through their teeth without looking up from their tablets. Parents of patients sometimes complained about her presence in the room while she was standing 2 feet from them because they assumed she could not understand English or did not care if she did. She was background noise, a pair of gloved hands and a mop bucket, an interruption at most. Her supervisor, a wiry man named Donovan Pike, ran the night shift environmental services team the way a foreman runs a factory line. Efficiency first, humanity later, or never. 3 weeks earlier, Donovan had written Imani up for sitting on the edge of a child's bed for 4 minutes. The child had been 6 years old, alone in her room at 2 in the morning, sobbing because she could not find her stuffed rabbit. Imani had found it under the bed, returned it, and stayed for a moment to make sure the little girl could breathe again without choking. "You are paid to clean, not to comfort," Donovan had said, sliding the write-up across the table. "There are nurses for that. There are social workers for that. There are chaplains for that. You are an ease tech. You have 19 rooms to turn over before sunrise. Sit on another bed, I write you up again. 3 write-ups, you are out. Understood?" Imani had nodded. She had not argued. She had learned a long time ago that arguing with the people who controlled your paycheck was a privilege she could not afford. Not when her grandmother was dying in a rented duplex 26 miles away, the only mother she had ever known, the only family she had left. Vera Carter was 72 years old and she was losing her body 1 organ at a time. Congestive heart failure, stage 3, with kidney complications and the beginning stages of vascular dementia. She needed 3 different medications that combined cost over $600 a month even with the discount card from the pharmacy. She needed a home health aide 3 days a week, and the agency charged $28 an hour. She needed a special diet, low sodium, low potassium, low everything that was cheap. She needed someone to drive her to her cardiologist twice a month, which Imani did, even when it meant working a double shift the night before and showing up to the appointment so exhausted she could barely sign the intake forms. Imani never told a single person at the hospital about her grandmother, never complained, never asked for help, never even mentioned that she had a family at all. She just clocked in, did the job, gave her blood once a month, and clocked out. Every morning at 7:30, when her shift ended, Imani walked out of the staff exit on the south side of the hospital and crossed Wisconsin Avenue to wait for the bus. And every morning on the side of the bus stop shelter, she saw the same campaign poster. A polished, smiling woman with auburn hair and a confident jaw standing in front of an American flag. Senator Margaret Whitfield. The text underneath read, "Fighting for every American family, because no child should be left behind." Imani walked past that poster every single morning without giving it a second look. She had no idea who Margaret Whitfield was beyond the name. She did not follow politics. She did not have time. She did not know that the senator had a daughter. She did not know that the daughter had a rare autoimmune disorder. She did not know that the daughter was a patient inside the same hospital Imani had just walked out of. And she certainly did not know that the small, dark-haired girl on the fourth-floor pediatric specialty ward, the one whose name was kept off the patient board for security reasons, was being kept alive once a month by what Imani gave away for free. She just walked, head down, jacket pulled tight, another invisible woman heading home in a city that had never once stopped to learn her name. 4 floors above the small basement room where Imani gave her blood every month, a completely different world existed. A world that smelled like fresh-cut lilies instead of bleach. A world where the hospital rooms had reclining leather chairs for visitors, private bathrooms with marble countertops, and security cameras pointing both into the room and out at the hallway. This was the Bradford Pediatric Specialty Suite, a wing of St. Catherine's that most employees of the hospital had never even been allowed to walk through. You needed a special badge. You needed a background check. You needed to be approved by both hospital administration and the Federal Protective Detail that handled the families who stayed there. In Suite 412, a 7-year-old girl named Lillian Whitfield was sitting cross-legged on top of her hospital bed, coloring a picture of a horse. A bag of dark red blood hung from the IV pole beside her, dripping slowly into a thin plastic line that ran into a port surgically implanted just below her collarbone. She did not look up when the door opened. She had been in and out of this room so many times in her short life that the sight of a doctor walking in barely registered anymore. Her mother sat in the leather chair by the window. Senator Margaret Whitfield, 48 years old, the junior senator from Pennsylvania, ranking member of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Her face was on the cover of Time magazine 3 months ago, accompanied by a headline that read, "The Woman Who Could Fix American Health Care." She had given a speech on the Senate floor 2 weeks earlier that had been viewed 11 million times on social media. She had appeared on 3 different Sunday morning news programs in the last 60 days. She was, by any measure that mattered in Washington, one of the most powerful women in the country, and her daughter was dying. Lillian had been diagnosed 3 years earlier with autoimmune hemolytic anemia, a condition where the body's own immune system mistakes its red blood cells for invaders and destroys them. The destruction was slow most months, manageable, but it was relentless. Without monthly transfusions of compatible blood, Lillian's hemoglobin would crash. Her organs would starve for oxygen. Her heart would begin to fail. The transfusions were not a cure. They were a tether. They were the thin rope keeping her tied to the world of the living. And the tether required OB-negative blood, specifically. Exactly. No substitutions. Margaret watched the bag drip. She watched the color slowly return to her daughter's cheeks the same way she had watched it return month after month for the last 24 months, and she felt the same thing she always felt in this room, a cold, sharp, useless rage. Rage at the universe for handing her a child this fragile. Rage at her own helplessness. Rage at the fact that she could pass a bill, summon a cabinet secretary, get the president of a Fortune 500 company on the phone in 20 minutes. And yet she could not, with all of that power, manufacture a single drop of the one thing her daughter needed to keep breathing. Dr. Priya Sundaram walked in, tablet in hand. She was the chief of pediatric hematology, born in Mumbai, trained at Johns Hopkins, the kind of doctor who had stopped being impressed by famous parents 20 years ago. To her, Lillian was a patient, Margaret was a mother. The Senate seat was irrelevant in this room. "Numbers are responding well," Dr. Sundaram said, glancing at the monitor. "Hemoglobin should be back in safe range by tomorrow morning." Margaret leaned forward. "Doctor, I have to ask you something I have asked you before. And I know what you're going to say, but I have to ask it again." Dr. Sundaram set her tablet down. She already knew. Who is giving her this blood every month the same time? Someone keeps showing up. Someone keeps making sure she has what she needs. Who is it? Senator, you know I cannot tell you. My daughter is alive because of a stranger I cannot thank, a stranger I cannot protect, a stranger I cannot even guarantee will come back next month. What if they stop? What if something happens to them? What if they move? What is the contingency plan? Because right now, as far as I can tell, my child's survival depends on the kindness of one anonymous person who does not even know we exist. That is correct, Senator. That is exactly the situation. Margaret pressed her fingertips against her eyelids. I sit on the Senate Health Committee. I have spent the last decade of my life building policy around access to care. And I cannot find out the name of the person saving my daughter's life. You cannot and you should not. Dr. Sundaram's voice was soft but immovable. Donor anonymity is not a courtesy. It is a federal protection. It exists because the moment we let powerful people identify donors, donors stop giving. They get pressured, harassed, stalked, bribed. The system collapses. And other children who do not have a senator for a mother, would die first. Anonymity is the only reason this person can keep giving freely. The moment you know them, the gift changes. Margaret looked at her daughter. Lillian was still coloring her horse. She had given it purple legs and a yellow mane. "Can you at least tell me," Margaret asked quietly, "if it is the same person every month?" Dr. Sundaram hesitated. She looked at the tablet on her lap. She looked at the child on the bed, and she made a small choice. "It has been the same person," she said, "for 24 months, without a single missed donation." Margaret sat in silence for a long moment after Dr. Sundaram left the room. 24 months. The same person. A stranger had quietly, faithfully, anonymously been the difference between her daughter's survival and her death for 2 solid years, and Margaret did not even know if that person was a man or a woman, young or old, near or far. She did not know what they did for a living, whether they had children of their own, whether they were rich or poor, healthy or struggling. She knew nothing, and she could do nothing with that nothing. She looked at Lillian, still coloring, humming softly to a song only she could hear. And Margaret made a quiet promise to her daughter that she did not say out loud. "Someday, somehow, I will find that person, and I will make sure they never have to worry about a single thing for the rest of their lives." She did not yet understand how naive that promise would sound when she actually met the woman behind it. If you are already invested in this story, take a moment now to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because what is about to happen between Imani and the small girl on the 4th floor will rearrange everything you think you know about what it means to be seen. It was a Tuesday night, 2 minutes past midnight. St. Catherine's was in that strange in-between hour when the hallways finally went still. Most parents had gone home, most non-emergency staff had clocked out, the lights in the long corridors had dimmed to their overnight setting, and the only sounds left were the soft hum of medical equipment and the occasional ping of an elevator nobody was riding. Imani pushed her cleaning cart down the 4th floor hallway, restricted wing. She had only been cleared to work this floor for the past few weeks after the regular tech who handled it had gone on maternity leave. The badge clipped to her uniform had a small red dot in the corner that meant she had passed the additional background check required for the high-security suites. She still did not know why this wing required clearance. She had not asked. It was not her business. Room by room, wipe the surfaces, mop the floor, restock the gloves, check the sharps container. Empty the linen bag, move on. She had done this routine so many times she could have done it in her sleep, and on some nights with how tired she was, she nearly did. Suite 412 was next on her list. She knocked once softly, no answer. She knocked again. A small voice on the other side of the door said, "It's open." Imani pushed the door open slowly. The room was dim, lit only by a soft yellow glow from a small lamp shaped like a crescent moon on the nightstand. In the bed, a small girl was sitting up against 2 pillows, very much awake, hugging her knees to her chest. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy braid that had clearly been slept on. Her eyes were huge and tired and lonely. "Hi, sweetheart," Imani said, keeping her voice low. "I'm just here to clean up. I can come back if you want. You okay in here?" The girl shook her head. "I don't want you to go," she paused. "Mommy had to leave for a vote. She's coming back in the morning." "But I don't like the dark and the machines make weird noises." Imani looked at the cart in the hallway. She looked at her watch. She still had 15 rooms left to do before sunrise. Donovan was going to check her progress in less than 2 hours. He was going to find her behind schedule. He was going to write her up again. She walked into the room anyway. She parked the cart at the door, leaving it slightly ajar so the hallway light filtered in, and she sat down in the chair beside the bed. "What's your name, baby?" "Lillian, but everyone calls me Lily." "Well, Lily, I'm Miss Imani, and I'll tell you what, I'll sit with you for a little bit just until you feel sleepy again. Would that be okay?" Lillian nodded so fast her braid bounced. Then she lay back down, pulled her blanket up to her chin, and turned her whole body toward Imani like she was trying to soak in another human being through her skin. Imani started talking, quietly. About the porch swing on her grandmother's house in North Carolina. About the way fireflies looked in summer when the sky finally turned dark blue instead of black. About a sparrow that used to build a nest above the kitchen window every spring, year after year, even though somebody always tore it down by July. She talked about her grandmother teaching her how to braid hair on a doll when she was 4 years old. She talked about the smell of cornbread in a cast-iron pan. Lillian listened. Her eyes got heavier, her grip on the blanket loosened, and just before she drifted off, she reached under her pillow and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. She unfolded it carefully like it was made of glass. "This is the blood angel," she whispered, holding the paper up so Imani could see. It was a drawing, crayon on red construction paper. A figure with brown skin and a halo over its head, holding what looked like a heart, but might also have been a bag of blood with a face drawn on it. The kind of art only a 7-year-old can make. "Who is the blood angel, baby?" "Somebody gives me their blood every month so I don't die. Mommy says we don't know who they are. But I know they're an angel. I made this picture for them. I keep it under my pillow so they know I love them, even though we never met." Imani sat very still. She felt something warm and painful open up inside her chest, although she could not have said why. She did not connect the drawing in Lillian's hand to the blood bag hanging quietly from the IV pole in the corner. She had no reason to. She was the woman who cleaned the floor. The blood angel was somebody else. "I'm sure they know, Lily. I'm sure they love you right back." Lillian smiled in her sleep. Within a minute, her breathing slowed and evened out. Imani tucked the blanket around her shoulders, set the drawing carefully on the nightstand, and quietly pushed her cart back into the hallway. She had no idea that the child she had just sung to sleep was the same child she had been keeping alive for 24 straight months. And she had no idea that in just under 3 weeks, the world was going to find out. Imani Carter had not always been a janitor, not in the story she carried inside her chest. Not in the version of her life that her grandmother had imagined when she filled out the kindergarten paperwork at the public elementary school in Durham, North Carolina, almost 30 years earlier. Imani had been a nurse, almost, 3 semesters away from her Bachelor of Science in Nursing at Howard University, top of her class in clinical skills, recommended for an internship at Children's National Medical Center. She had a letter of acceptance in her bedroom drawer that she still had not been able to throw away, even now, 11 years later. It sat under a stack of expired insurance documents and unpaid parking tickets, the corners of the envelope softened by time. She had wanted to be a pediatric nurse practitioner. That had been the dream. She wanted to work in a children's hospital. She wanted to be the woman who held the IV line steady so the toddler did not panic. She wanted to be the one who explained to the scared parents that their baby was going to be okay in language that did not require a medical dictionary. She had a way with children. Everyone said so. Her professors, her clinical instructors, her classmates, strangers at the grocery store whose toddlers stopped crying the moment Imani made a goofy face from across the aisle. The summer before her senior year, her grandmother had a stroke, not a massive one. Not the kind that kills you in an instant, the slow kind. The kind that whittles a person down month by month, taking small pieces of them at a time. Vera Carter, the woman who had raised Imani from infancy after Imani's mother died in childbirth, the only family Imani had in the entire world, could no longer live on her own. Imani had done the math, the same way Amara would have done it in another version of this story, and the same way every black woman in America who has ever had to choose between her future and her family has done it. She sat on the floor of her dorm room at 2 in the morning with a calculator and a yellow legal pad and ran the numbers again and again, hoping they would change. They did not. Senior year tuition. Books. The rent on her grandmother's duplex in Maryland because Imani would have to move closer to take care of her. Vera's medications. Vera's home health aid. Vera's groceries. Vera's electric bill because Vera had stopped being able to remember to pay it. There was not enough money for both school and Vera, not even close. Imani withdrew from Howard University on a humid Wednesday in August. Her academic advisor cried. Imani did not. She had already done her crying the week before, alone in her car, in the parking lot of the dialysis center where Vera was getting her blood pressure checked. By the time she signed the withdrawal forms, she was empty. She moved into the duplex with her grandmother. She got her certified nursing assistant license in 8 weeks because it was the fastest credential a hospital would accept. Then she upgraded that to her environmental services certification because it paid $2 an hour more, and because $2 an hour over the course of a year is the difference between making rent and not. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself she would go back to school in a year, maybe 2. She told herself it was just a delay. That was 11 years ago. Some women would have grown bitter. Some women would have spent every single shift mourning the future that got taken from them. Imani did not. Not because she did not feel the loss, She felt it every single night she walked into a hospital wearing a janitor's uniform instead of a nurse's scrubs. She felt it every time a nurse barked an order at her without making eye contact. She felt it every time she changed the linens on a bed in a room where a doctor was explaining a diagnosis to a family, and she could have explained it just as well, in words the family would have actually understood. But her grandmother had taught her something a long time ago that kept the bitterness from putting down roots. When Imani was 12 years old, the year after her grandfather died, Vera had taken her to the Red Cross blood drive at the AME church on Highway 70. It was Imani's first time. She had been terrified of the needle. Vera had held her hand the whole time and said something that Imani had never forgotten. "Baby, your blood doesn't know if you're rich or poor. It doesn't know what color your skin is or what kind of name you have or whether you went to college. It just knows how to keep somebody alive. That's the most honest thing about you. When you give it away, you give the realest part of yourself, and you give it without asking for anything back. That's holy work. Don't ever stop doing it." Imani had not stopped. Not in Durham, not in D.C., not in any city she had passed through. Not when she was working 2 jobs, not when she was sleeping 4 hours a night, not when her own iron levels dropped and she had to choke down liver and spinach for a month to bring them back up. She had OB-negative blood, and she knew what that meant. She knew people died waiting for it. She knew there were children somewhere whose lives depended on people like her showing up. And she could not, in good conscience, sit at home knowing that, so she worked her shifts. She cleaned her rooms. She held children's hands in the dark. She paid for her grandmother's medications. She gave her blood away once a month for free to strangers she would never meet. She had given up the dream of being a nurse, but she had never given up the heart of one. She practiced nursing in every room she cleaned, with every scared child she comforted, and every month with every pint of blood she let them take from her arm. This story is about to turn in a direction nobody is expecting. If you are still here, hit that subscribe button and stay close, because the moment everything cracks open is just one paragraph away. It was a Friday, 3:48 in the afternoon. And on the 4th floor of St. Catherine's Children's Hospital, something was going badly wrong. Lillian Whitfield had been fine that morning. She had eaten half a bowl of oatmeal, asked her nanny when she could go home, and started a new coloring page of a unicorn. By 11, she was tired. By noon, she was pale. By 1, her lips had taken on a faint blue tint that her nanny knew immediately was not normal. By 1:15, the rapid response team was in the room. By 1:30, Dr. Sundaram was standing at the foot of the bed reading numbers off a monitor with a face that did not move at all, which was the way Dr. Sundaram's face moved when she was extremely scared. "She is in active hemolytic crisis," she said, half into a phone and half to the senator who had just burst through the door, still wearing the navy blazer she had been photographed in on the Senate floor an hour earlier. "Her body is destroying red blood cells faster than I have seen in any patient this year. Hemoglobin 5.1 and still dropping. If we do not transfuse her in the next 4 hours, we are going to be looking at oxygen starvation in her brain and her heart." Margaret Whitfield, who had argued cabinet officials into submission, who had stared down lobbyists worth $100 million without blinking, grabbed the bedrail with both hands to keep her knees from buckling. "Then transfuse her right now. Use whatever you have." "Senator, we do not have it." The 4 words landed like a fist. "What do you mean you do not have it?" "OB-negative is the rarest blood type in the country. The national supply has been critically low for the past 6 weeks. We have called every blood center in the district. We have called Baltimore. We have called Richmond. We have called Philadelphia. There is no OB-negative within driving distance. There is 1 unit at a hospital in Pittsburgh, but they need it for a trauma patient who arrived an hour ago. They are not releasing it." "Then call the White House. Call the Pentagon. They have blood reserves. They will release 1 unit for a senator's daughter." "Senator, we tried that. The reserves are OB-positive and O-negative. Nobody stockpiles OB-negative because nobody can. There is no shelf-stable substitute. The only OB-negative on Earth right now is inside the bodies of people who have not donated it yet, or in a regional supply that someone else is already counting on." Margaret stared at her. "This is one of the best hospitals in the country. I sit on the committee that funds you, and you are telling me that you cannot find 1 bag of blood for my child." "I am telling you, Senator, that there are some problems money cannot solve. Blood is one of them. The only thing that can solve this is a person with the right type who is willing to walk in here in the next 2 hours and lay down their arm." She paused. She glanced at her tablet where the donor records were open. The same name, the same woman, the same 24 months. She closed her mouth before she said it. "I will make some calls," she said quietly and walked out of the room. What Dr. Sundaram almost said in that hallway would have ended the anonymity protocol 2 weeks early. But she held her tongue, and that silence almost cost Lillian her life. It was 9:51 at night when Imani Carter overheard it. She was on the second floor restocking carts in the supply room. Two surgical nurses came around the corner of the corridor, speaking in low, fast voices, the way hospital staff speak to each other when a situation is sliding sideways. "The Whitfield kid on 4, 7 years old, active hemolytic crisis. They have been calling everybody. There is nothing. If they do not find OB negative by midnight, they are going to try an exchange transfusion with type-matched plasma and hope she can hold on. That is like a 30% success rate in a kid that size." "I know." They turned the corner and were gone. They had not noticed the woman standing 6 feet away with an armful of paper towel rolls. OB negative. Imani set the paper towels down on the cart. Slowly. The way you set something down when your hands are not entirely sure they can be trusted. She had given blood 22 days ago. The minimum recommended interval between whole blood donations was 56 days. 22 was less than half of that. Her iron had been low for weeks already. She had been dragging herself through shifts on caffeine and stubbornness. If she gave blood now on top of how tired she already was, her body might not be able to compensate. She could faint. She could crash. She could end up in a hospital bed herself, which would mean her grandmother would have nobody to drive her to dialysis on Monday morning. She knew all of this. She knew the rules by heart. She had read every pamphlet in the donation room a dozen times. She also knew that somewhere 4 floors above her, a child she had never officially met was running out of time. And the only thing standing between that child and a coffin was a woman who had what almost nobody else in this entire city had. She walked fast to the blood bank. The technician on the night shift looked up when she came through the door, and his face fell when he recognized her. "Imani, you can't. It is way too soon. You know it is too soon." "I know. I cannot let you donate. It is against protocol. I could lose my license." "Then page somebody who can override it. There is a child on the 4th floor about to die because nobody in this city has what I have. I am not leaving this room until somebody takes my blood. I will sit in this chair until somebody listens." The technician stared at her. Then he picked up the phone and paged Dr. Sundaram. Dr. Sundaram arrived in under 3 minutes. She walked into the blood bank, looked at Imani sitting in the donor chair with her sleeve already rolled up, and something behind her eyes broke open. She knew exactly whose blood this was about to save. She knew the senator's daughter 4 floors up. She knew the drawing under the pillow. She knew the woman in front of her in faded scrubs had been doing this every single month for 2 years without knowing whose life she was holding together. She wanted more than anything to tell her. Right there, in that room, with the needle still in its sterile wrapper, she did not. "You understand the risks?" Dr. Sundaram asked instead. "I understand them. And you want to proceed anyway?" "I need to." Dr. Sundaram nodded once. The needle went in. Imani's blood, dark and warm and full of the only antibodies in the world that matched a small girl 4 floors above her, began filling the bag. She closed her eyes. Her grandmother's voice moved through her like a heartbeat. "Your blood does not know if you are rich or poor. It just knows how to keep somebody alive." Dr. Sundaram carried the bag herself. She did not trust a courier with it. She did not trust the pneumatic tube. She walked it up the 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was running slow, and she walked into suite 412 with the bag still warm in her hands. Margaret was sitting beside her daughter's bed, holding Lillian's small hand, watching the heart rate monitor climb in the wrong direction. She had not eaten. She had not spoken to her chief of staff. She had silenced her phone 14 minutes earlier and shoved it under a stack of magazines. The most powerful woman in the room was, for the first time in her adult life, completely powerless. Dr. Sundaram hung the bag, connected the line, started the drip. She did not say where it had come from. She did not say how. She just said, "We have what we need. She is going to be all right." Margaret pressed her forehead against her daughter's hand and made a sound that was not quite a sob. It was relief so enormous it had no language attached to it yet. 4 floors below, Imani lay back in the recovery chair. The room was spinning gently. Her arms felt full of sand. The technician handed her a juice box and 2 graham crackers and told her sternly not to move for the next 45 minutes. She did not argue. She sipped the juice and stared at the ceiling and listened to the soft mechanical hum of the refrigeration units that held the donations. She did not know that her blood was, at that very moment, pulling a 7-year-old girl back from an edge nobody had thought she could be pulled back from. She did not know that the senator's hand was shaking from relief in a room 4 floors above her head. She did not know that the drawing of the blood angel was sitting on a nightstand right next to the IV pole that held the bag with her donation barcode on it. She just lay there, dizzy and proud, and quietly certain that she had done the right thing. The next morning at 6:45, Margaret Whitfield was in Dr. Sundaram's office before the office lights had even fully come on. She had not slept. Her makeup from the previous day was still streaked under her eyes. She was holding a paper cup of coffee that she had not taken a single sip from. "I need to know who they are." She said it like a senator, like a woman who was used to being told yes. Dr. Sundaram did not look surprised. She had been expecting this conversation since she walked out of the blood bank the night before. "You know, I cannot tell you, Senator. My daughter almost died last night. She almost died because we ran out of blood. And you are telling me there is one person in this city who has been keeping her alive for 2 years, and I am not allowed to know their name." "That is exactly what I am telling you." Margaret set the paper cup down. She paced to the window, paced back. She was a woman who solved problems for a living. She built coalitions. She moved legislation. She bent systems. And right now, the system in front of her was refusing to bend. "There are laws," Dr. Sundaram continued. "Donor anonymity is not a courtesy. It is a federal protection. It exists because without it, donors get pressured and harassed and exploited. The minute we break it for one powerful family, the system collapses for every family that comes after. If donors stop trusting us, donors stop giving. And if donors stop giving, children die, including children whose parents do not sit in the United States Senate." Margaret turned to face her. "I am not going to pressure anyone. I want to thank them. I want to make sure they are taken care of. I want to make sure my daughter has a reliable source of blood for the rest of her life. And I understand that, but what you want does not override what they are entitled to. This person chose to give anonymously. That choice belongs to them, not to you. Respecting it is not optional, not for you, not for me, not for anyone." Margaret's jaw tightened. She looked at the window, she looked at the floor. She did not pull out a checkbook the way Julian Fairfax once had in another version of this story because she was a senator, and senators do not write checks for things like this. They do something else. They use leverage. "Doctor, I sit on the committee that approves the federal appropriations for pediatric research grants. St. Catherine's received $4.1 million in NIH funding last year. I could make that number larger, substantially larger, or I could make it smaller, substantially smaller." Dr. Sundaram looked at her for a long moment, and then she said very quietly, "Senator, if I sell a donor's identity for a research grant, what does that make me? What does that make this hospital? A place where federal funding can buy access to anybody's medical records, as long as the chairwoman's daughter is the patient. That is not a hospital anymore. That is a marketplace. And if you actually believe that is what this institution should be, then you are not the senator I voted for." Margaret stood very still. She had not been spoken to like that in a long time, maybe ever. She picked up her paper cup of untasted coffee. She walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. "I am sorry," she said. She did not turn around when she said it. "That was beneath me." "Yes, Senator, it was." Margaret left the office without another word. She could not buy the answer. She could not legislate the answer. She could not subpoena the answer. And so the universe handed her the answer the way the universe usually does. By accident, it was 3 days later, 11:42 on a Tuesday night. Margaret had come back to the hospital after a long committee hearing to spend the night in Lillian's room, which she did once a week when her schedule allowed. She got off the elevator on the 3rd floor by mistake, because she was tired and had been reading on her phone, and she did not realize her error until she had walked 20 feet down the wrong corridor. She turned to head back to the elevator, and she saw a woman on her hands and knees outside the 3rd floor bathroom, scrubbing a long streak of vomit and blood off the linoleum with a brush and a bottle of disinfectant. Margaret slowed. She did not know why. Maybe because the corridor was so quiet. Maybe because the woman was scrubbing with the kind of focused care that you do not usually see at almost midnight when nobody is watching. The woman wore the gray uniform of the Environmental Services team. Her hair was pulled back into a low bun. Her hands were inside thin blue gloves that did not quite hide the cracked skin underneath. A nurse came around the corner from the other direction and called out, "Hey, Imani, Sundaram is asking about you. Said something about checking your iron at the end of your shift. She wants you in the blood bank before you clock out." The woman on the floor looked up. "Tell her I will be there." Imani, Margaret stood very still. She did not move for almost a full minute. She watched the woman on the floor go back to scrubbing. She watched her hands. She watched her shoulders. She watched the small, methodical way she worked, as if every square inch of that floor was her personal responsibility. And somewhere in Margaret's chest, a piece of information dropped into place that she had not been hunting for. Dr. Sundaram had said her name once in passing the morning Margaret had threatened her with the appropriations bill. She had said, "She is in the blood bank right now, by the way. The donor, she is upstairs from us. She is in this building. She is in this building every single day, Senator, and you have never seen her." Margaret had assumed Dr. Sundaram was speaking figuratively. She had not been. Margaret stood in that corridor at 11:42 at night in a $5,000 coat, looking at a woman on her hands and knees scrubbing other people's blood off a hospital floor for $16 an hour. And she understood with a clarity that made her physically dizzy that this was the woman. That she had walked past this woman a dozen times in this building over the last 2 years. That this woman had been saving her daughter's life all along. She did not approach her. She did not say a word. She turned around, walked back to the elevator, rode it down to the lobby, and sat in her car in the parking garage for 45 minutes before she could trust herself to drive home. Margaret did not sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table in her townhouse in Georgetown, still wearing her coat, and stared at a glass of wine she never picked up. She kept seeing the same image, a woman on her hands and knees, a bottle of disinfectant, cracked hands inside thin blue gloves. The methodical, patient scrubbing of a stranger's mess at almost midnight with nobody watching. She had walked past that woman, in hallways, in elevators, outside her own daughter's room. She had walked past her, and her detail had walked past her, and her chief of staff had walked past her, and not one of them had ever turned ahead. The senator who had spent her career talking about the dignity of the American worker had been refusing to see the most important American worker in her own daughter's life for 2 solid years. She thought about Dr. Sundaram. She thought about what she had threatened her with, the appropriations bill, the funding, the leverage. She had walked into that woman's office and threatened to gut a children's hospital because she could not get her way. She had been, for a brief and very ugly moment, exactly the kind of person she had spent her entire political career claiming to fight against. She thought also about the woman, about what she did not yet know about her, about what was in that life, about what the woman might need. She did not approach Imani the next day, or the day after. She did her homework first, the way she always did her homework before she walked into anything important. Dr. Sundaram, when Margaret called her and apologized formally, refused to share medical records of any kind. But she did say this, carefully and within the limits of what she was allowed to say. Her name is Imani Carter. She is an environmental services technician on the night shift. She has worked at St. Catherine's for almost 11 years. She raises her grandmother, who has congestive heart failure. She was a senior at Howard School of Nursing 11 years ago and had to withdraw for family reasons. She has never asked anyone in this hospital for anything. She gives blood every month and asks nothing in return. That is what I can tell you. The rest, Senator, you will have to ask her yourself if she chooses to talk to you. Margaret listened. She wrote nothing down. She did not need to. She came back to the hospital on the following Thursday, but not as a senator. She came in jeans and a wool coat and a baseball cap, without her detail, which her chief of staff later told her was the most reckless thing she had ever done in her career. She came at 6:12 in the morning, and she waited on the curb outside the South Staff exit on Wisconsin Avenue. It was raining. The kind of cold drizzle that does not feel like much until it has been hitting your shoulders for 10 minutes. At 6:37, Imani Carter walked out of the staff exit, head down, jacket pulled tight, moving fast because the bus was coming and she had 8 minutes to make it. Margaret stepped off the curb. Imani! Imani stopped. She turned. She looked at the woman in the baseball cap, standing in the rain, and her face went through several quick expressions. Confusion, a flash of recognition. Then a deep, careful neutrality that she had perfected over years of dealing with strangers who knew her name when she did not know theirs. Yes. Do you know who I am? Imani studied her face. The baseball cap was pulled low, but the auburn hair was visible underneath, and the jaw was the same jaw on the bus stop poster Imani had walked past every morning for the better part of 3 years. Her eyes widened by a fraction, then settled. You are Senator Whitfield. I am. May I have 10 minutes of your time? I will pay for your cab home if you miss your bus. I will pay for the next week of cabs if you would like. Imani did not respond immediately. She looked at the bus stop. She looked at the rain. She looked at the woman in front of her who was not flanked by aides, who was not surrounded by cameras, who was by all visible evidence alone. What is this about, Senator? It is about my daughter. Imani's expression did not change. I do not understand. I clean the floors here. I am not a nurse. I am not a doctor. I do not know your daughter. You do. You do not know that you do, but you do. Margaret stepped a little closer into the small, dry patch of sidewalk under the awning of the bus shelter, so they were standing under the same roof for the first time. My daughter is 7 years old. Her name is Lillian. She has autoimmune hemolytic anemia. For the last 2 years, she has needed a transfusion of OB-negative blood every single month to stay alive. For 2 years, one person has been giving that blood, anonymously, without missing a single month, including 3 weeks ago when the hospital ran out and Lillian almost died and somebody walked into that blood bank at 10 o'clock at night and donated again, even though it was way too soon. Imani had gone very still. It is you. You are the donor. I am here because I needed to look you in the face and say thank you. The rain made a soft, steady sound on the awning above them. A bus hissed past half a block away, then kept going. Imani did not answer for almost a full minute. When she did, her voice was very quiet. Suite 412, 4th floor, restricted wing, Margaret nodded. The little girl with the braid, the one who asked me not to leave because the machines made noise, the one with the drawing of the blood angel under her pillow. Imani's eyes filled, but she did not cry. I sat with her 3 weeks ago. I told her about my grandmother's porch. I tucked her in. I did not know. I did not. I would never have. I do not. I have never tried to know. I know. How did you find me? I saw you on the 3rd floor last Tuesday night. You were scrubbing blood off the floor outside the bathroom. A nurse called you by your name. And I realized, standing there in my coat, that I had been walking past you for 2 years and I had never once seen you. I had never even thought to look. Imani took a small step back, not in anger. In the way a person steps back when something enormous is being placed in front of them and they need a little distance to take it in. Senator, I do not want anything from you. I have not offered anything yet. You are about to. I know you are. I can see it on your face. Please do not. I did not give my blood for 2 years so that one day somebody important would write me a check. I gave it because my grandmother taught me that giving it was the most honest thing a body can do. The minute I take money for it, it stops being honest. It becomes a transaction, and it is not. It has never been. Margaret looked at her for a long moment. The rain kept falling. Then let me ask you a different question, not as a senator, not as a donor, just as one woman to another. Is there anything I can do for the people you love? Imani's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She did not answer. But for the first time, she did not say no. Margaret brought Imani up to the 4th floor the following afternoon. Imani had changed out of her uniform and put on the nicest clothes she owned, which was a navy sweater her grandmother had bought her 3 Christmases ago and a pair of khaki pants she ironed twice that morning. She felt deeply out of place riding the elevator past floors she had only ever cleaned. The badge on her chest was the same badge. The hallways were the same hallways, but she was walking through them as a guest now, and the strangeness of that did not sit easily on her shoulders. Margaret opened the door to suite 412. Lillian was sitting up in bed, eating a small bowl of strawberries, watching something on a tablet propped on her knees. She looked up when the door opened and her whole face transformed. Miss Imani, you came in the day, you never come in the day. Margaret stepped to the side. She did not interrupt. She wanted to watch this happen without putting herself in the middle of it. Hi, Lily, Imani said. Her voice was unsteady. How are you feeling, baby? Better. Mommy says I had a bad week, but I feel better now. The blood angel came again. She paused. She looked at her mother. She looked back at Imani. Then she looked at the small drawing on the nightstand, the construction paper figure with the halo and the heart. Then she looked at Imani again, and her eyes went huge. Are you the blood angel? Imani could not speak. She nodded. You are the story lady and the blood angel. I am one person, baby. I just do 2 things. Lillian set the bowl of strawberries aside very carefully, the way you set something down when you do not want to spill it. Then she opened her arms. Imani crossed the room and gathered that small child up against her chest and held her the way she had held her grandmother through the worst nights of her stroke. Tightly, like she was trying to give every cell in her body permission to finally rest. Margaret stood by the door. She did not move. She had been raised, professionally and personally, to control her face under any circumstances, and at that particular moment her face was not under her control at all. Tears ran freely. She did not bother to wipe them. Lillian whispered something against Imani's shoulder. Imani laughed, a soft, broken sound, and whispered something back. Margaret could not hear what either of them said. She understood with a kind of quiet shock that she was not supposed to. That night, Margaret called her chief of staff at home and told him to clear her schedule for the next 72 hours. She drafted the bill herself, longhand, on legal pads, at her kitchen table. She refused to let her staff write it for her because she wanted every word of it to belong to her. She called it the Rare Blood Access and Donor Protection Act. It had 3 core provisions. The first established a federally funded national rare blood type registry, real-time matching, automatic alerts, a system that would make sure no hospital in America ever again ran out of AB negative or B negative or any of the other rare types because they did not know who had it. The senator who had spent 10 years talking about the dignity of access was going to spend the next 10 making sure access actually existed. The second created federal grant funding for hospital frontline support workers, environmental services technicians, certified nursing assistants, patient transporters, food service staff, and overnight aides. The grants would tie federal hospital funding to a baseline wage of at least $22 an hour for these workers in any hospital receiving more than $10 million in federal money. There were 240,000 frontline hospital workers in America earning less than $17 an hour. The bill would lift every single one of them. The third provision was the one Margaret was proudest of. It was named, with permission Imani had not exactly given but had not refused either, the Vera Carter Nursing Education Grant. It would fund full tuition, books, and a monthly living stipend for any frontline hospital worker who wanted to return to school for a nursing degree, a physician assistant degree, or a medical degree. There were no income caps. There were no age limits. There were no strings. The only requirement was that the applicant had spent at least 3 years working as a non-clinical hospital support worker in the United States. She introduced the bill on the Senate floor on a Wednesday in March. She spoke for 41 minutes. She did not use a teleprompter. She did not check her notes. She told the story with Imani's written permission in careful and respectful terms. She did not name her. She called her simply the woman who saved my daughter. She ended with this. There is a woman in this country who has been keeping my child alive for 2 years. She earns $16 an hour. She raises her grandmother on that salary. She gave up her nursing degree to do it. She has never once asked me for a single thing. The richest, most powerful nation in human history is held together by women like her, and we treat them like they are invisible. That ends today. With this bill, it ends today. The bill passed the Senate 7 months later with a vote of 81 to 19. It cleared the House 2 months after that. It was signed into law on a Tuesday in November. Imani watched the signing ceremony from her grandmother's living room. Vera Carter, frail and slow, sat in the recliner beside her with a quilt over her knees. The television in the corner was the same television Imani had watched all the way through nursing school and all the way through 11 years of janitorial work. The screen showed the President of the United States sitting at a long table, signing his name to a bill that bore Imani's grandmother's name. Vera did not understand entirely what she was looking at. The dementia had taken a little more of her in the last year, and large public moments did not always land the way they used to. But she squeezed Imani's hand, and she pointed at the screen with one shaking finger, and she said, "Baby, that man is writing your grandmother's name on the television." "Yes, Mama, he is. What for? For you and for me and for everybody like us." Vera nodded slowly. Then she said very softly, "Good. About time, baby, about time." 6 months after the signing ceremony, Imani Carter walked into the admissions office at the Johns Hopkins School of Nursing, carrying a folder with her old transcripts from Howard, a letter of recommendation from Dr. Priya Sundaram, and an acceptance letter she had read so many times the paper had started to soften at the corners. She was 37 years old. She was wearing a new pair of shoes for the first time in 4 years because she could finally afford them. She was carrying a backpack she had bought from a thrift store for $9 because some habits do not break just because the bank account changes. The Vera Carter grant covered everything: tuition, books, housing, a monthly living stipend that was, by itself, larger than her old paycheck had ever been. She did not have to choose between her grandmother's medication and her dream anymore. Vera had a full-time home health aide now, paid for through a Medicaid waiver Margaret's office had quietly walked through the bureaucracy on her behalf. Not because Margaret had asked for special favors, but because Margaret had finally bothered to learn how the system actually worked for people who were not senators, and she had used that knowledge to make sure one woman, in one small duplex in Maryland, did not get left behind. Imani sat in the lecture hall on her first morning, surrounded by students who were 10 and 15 years younger than she was, and she opened her notebook to a fresh page. The professor wrote a single sentence on the whiteboard. "Nursing begins where seeing begins." Imani wrote it down. She underlined it twice. She thought about Donovan Pike, her old supervisor, who had written her up for sitting on the edge of a child's bed for 4 minutes. He still worked the night shift at St. Catherine's. Imani had run into him in the parking garage 2 months earlier, after the law passed but before her first semester started. He had not known what to say to her. He had managed, eventually, to say, "I am sorry." She had nodded. She had not said it was okay because it had not been, but she had said, "Thank you for saying that out loud." It was the most he had ever offered her in 11 years, and she let it be enough. She thought about Lillian, who was 8 now in remission, in 2nd grade at a public school her mother had insisted she attend instead of the private one all the other senators' children went to. Lillian sent Imani a drawing in the mail once a month. Different subjects each time. Horses, dragons, flowers. The original drawing, the Blood Angel one, was framed and hanging on the wall of Imani's small apartment in Baltimore, next to a photograph of her grandmother on her porch in Durham. She thought about Margaret. They were not friends exactly. They were not family exactly. But they were something. They spoke on the phone once a month. They had dinner together every other Sunday at Margaret's townhouse in Georgetown, where Lillian would set the table herself and Vera, on her good days, would sit at the head of it and remind everyone to say grace. Margaret had stopped wearing $5,000 coats. She had not made a public statement about it. She had just stopped. Some changes do not need a press release. 3 years later, Imani graduated. She walked across a stage in a white cap and a white gown, and she received her diploma, Bachelor of Science in Nursing. She had not stopped at her bachelor's. She was already enrolled in the master's program. She wanted to be a pediatric nurse practitioner. She wanted to work in a children's hospital. She wanted to be the woman who held the IV line steady so the toddler did not panic. The dream she had set down at 26 was still sitting exactly where she had left it, and it had been waiting for her the whole time. When the dean called her name, the auditorium did not just applaud. It stood. Because the people in that room knew. Her classmates knew. Her professors knew. The hospital staff who had come to see one of their own walk across that line, from the lowest rung of the system to a degree that put RN after her name, knew. In the 5th row, 3 people sat together. Lillian, 12 years old now, holding a small bouquet of yellow daisies. Margaret, in a simple black blazer, no makeup, no detail, just a woman watching another woman receive what she had earned. And in a wheelchair beside them with a soft pink quilt tucked over her knees, Vera Carter. 78 years old. Frail. Forgetting more than she remembered most days. But on that morning in that auditorium, when her granddaughter's name was called, Vera Carter sat up straight in her wheelchair and clapped her hands together slowly and steadily, and said in a voice that carried farther than anyone expected, "That's my baby. That's my baby right there." Imani heard her over the applause. She knew she heard her because she looked into the 5th row and she found those 3 faces and she pressed her hand to her chest. She did not speak. She did not need to. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had mopped floors, the same hands that had scrubbed vomit and blood and worse off linoleum at midnight for $16 an hour. The same hands that had opened their veins 24 times so a stranger's child could keep on breathing. The same hands that had braided her grandmother's hair when her grandmother could no longer lift her own arms. Those hands were going to hold a stethoscope now. They were going to hold the hands of frightened children in the dark, professionally this time, and they were going to get paid for it. But they were never, ever going to forget where they had been. Thank you for following Imani's story from beginning to end. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the people you walk past every single day, please subscribe to this channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Here is the hardest truth. There are people in your life right now who are giving everything they have and getting almost nothing back. They mop the floors of your hospitals. They drive the buses that take your children to school. They stock the shelves of your grocery store at 3 in the morning. They care for your aging parents in nursing homes for wages that would not feed their own families. They are everywhere, and most of us walk right past them without ever learning their names. Imani's grandmother used to say something I want you to carry with you. Your blood does not know if you are rich or poor. It just knows how to keep somebody alive. That is the most honest thing about any of us. So I have 2 questions for you tonight. When was the last time you donated blood? And when was the last time you stopped, really stopped, and learned the name of someone you walk past every day? Leave your answer in the comments. Share this video with someone you think gives without being seen. And if you or someone you love has a rare blood type, please consider becoming a regular donor. You might be the only match for a child somewhere who is counting on a stranger. Until next time, stay kind, stay giving, and never, ever underestimate the power of what flows through your veins. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one.